I think what I want to open with before diving into this outline is we're really service people and healthcare people. We're helping people live healthy lives with their computers. And it does create a very strong relationship and creates very strong feelings. I want to say at the outset, if we all want to be successful in our profession, the key to what people, in my opinion, what people want and really want to pay for is you being truly present and truly caring about what their situation is and busting your butt to help them. So one of my main advice to people about setting up business structures is set up structures that actually allow you to do what you need to do to bust your butt for your customer. Our job in creating our business is to create a business where you can be yourself, you can be healthy, you can have a decent family life, but you're also fully present for your customers and really there to help them. And I'm going to start with talking about what is for us a new program. One of the good pieces of business advice that I've read is be on the lookout for new programs. Be on the lookout for where you can be helpful. This is a way of being a valuable business. One of my favorite teachers is Herbert Cole. There are two Herbert Coles. One is a senator, I think, from Michigan or something. But the other Herbert Cole is one of my favorite writers and teachers. And he wrote a classic book called 36 Children, which I strongly recommend to all computer practitioners. Not because it's about computers at all. In fact, computers hadn't been invented yet when this book was written. But Herbert Cole is a wonderful teacher who was a graduate of Teachers College at Columbia, and he got a gig teaching at a rotten school in I think it was the Bronx, with terrible textbooks, burnt out teachers, students who hadn't been taught anything in years. And this book is the story of how he dealt with it. It's an inspiring story. And he gives some very practical advice about being successful in the teaching business. And one of the most valuable piece of advice he gives is do stuff that other people won't bother with. So the fact is that if you right now want to start a ride-sharing company, or you want to create the latest platform to allow people to make money out of selling their used cornflakes, you'll have lots and lots of competition because those ideas are taken. A lot of people are realizing it's a gold rush. But if you step back and say, what do people really need? What is going to really help people? What's missing? You won't make the kind of crazy fortunes that these entrepreneurs are making, but you will make a steady living because people will always need you and want you because you're caring about them and you're being there for them. So I wanted to give an example of something that came up in our practice of where we took this idea and then said, we can provide this service and charge for it. So the issue is, as we were working with customers, we realized that if any of our customers dropped dead, God forbid, or they got really sick or otherwise incapacitated, there would be a big mess, And there are very dramatic examples of this. One of them was my father, who was a business consultant before that became fashionable, was tasked with this task. One of his friends in his business group, he died suddenly on the tennis court. He was 50-something, and he owned several companies, and his wife inherited them. His wife had no business experience of any kind, and she was now the CEO of several substantial companies. It was a mess. This guy apparently kept all the business stuff in his head. He was just running things, and he made no provision for what would happen if he got sick and died. And this is extremely common. Most people don't make provisions for this. And so I want to show you what my friend and colleague says about this. My friend Rob is a pain management specialist who did a lot of hospice work in his time. And he realized that a lot of people who were dying suddenly kind of get their act together and really are enjoying life in a way that they hadn't before. And he said, why wait? Do that early. So his program, Mindful Mortality program, is to get people to say, look, you're going to check out sometime. Do some of this work in advance. And as I see if I can find it. He has I think a toolkit somewhere in here where he has a map. He has a mortality map in here. Let's see if I can find it. The main point is that there are lots and lots of people. He's got all kinds of neat stuff on this. The mortality map is a map of the United States, and it shows the mortality, the percentage of people who die in each state. It's 100% in all 50 states, right? So the thing to realize is that all of your customers are going to die. A substantial number of your customers are going to run into trouble where they're not going to be able to maintain their business observations. And I have some bad news. It's going to happen to you too, and it's going to happen to me. This is particularly poignant for people who run small creative businesses where we're self-made, we've invented this thing by ourselves, but when we're no longer on the scene, it's really unpleasant for people. They're going to lose that specialness that you're providing. So my own belief is that when you create a business, it's also your obligation to create a succession to that business. So you want to be doing these valuable things, but also make sure that if you're no longer on the scene, someone else will do these valuable things. You've heard me bellow for years and years about the clinic that I try to help run and the internship program that I do. This is a very strategic goal. My goal is I love teaching and I'm really glad to help people. But my real goal is to make sure that there are people who will be here when I'm not. Because as part of this business process that I've been involved with for these decades, I've invented some things, I've come up with new ways of doing things, I have certain approaches that are not done by a lot of other computer people, and I don't want them to die with me. I want them to go on because I think they've been genuinely helpful to people. And so as I was thinking about this, I was saying, well, for all these customers, what do we do? How do we help them? And so we started this program, which is called Drop Dead Safely. So our goal is that when bad things happen, you've made some preparation. And I want to talk very concretely about what this means for our customers, but I think you'll also see the larger picture, which is be asking yourself as you're doing your work, who's going to do this when you're not here? And so I want to open by talking that when we started examining this very seriously, two colleagues of mine, one who's a professional organizer and another is a healthcare advocate and somebody who has serious health problems, who has had to advocate for her own health. We started talking about this and we said, well, we need a guinea pig. We need somebody to figure out how do we prepare people for this. And so I was the guinea pig. And so I thought, will healthcare proxy, where all the passwords are, all very important. We'll get to that in just a moment. But what I really started thinking about was my friend Bill. So as it happens, it's been my good fortune to have made a friend 40 years ago, my friend Bill Smiger, who has spent the last 40 years institutionalized in various mental hospitals. There's a whole long story behind it. My own opinion, he was misdiagnosed and sort of got into the system and never got out. I've not been able to help him out of it, but I have been able to be his friend, and I'm somebody who's visited him for year after year for now 40 years. I don't know what will happen. My wish is that we'll figure out a way of getting him out and getting him to have a healthy life and get a girlfriend and do all the things that I hope he'll be able to do. But in the meantime, somebody's got to visit him. And right now I'm that person. And I realized when I started looking at my list that what will happen if I die suddenly? Not only will nobody visit him, he probably won't even know that I died, like that he's institutionalized. So this actually pushed me, really kicked my butt. And I had wanted to do this for a long time, but I had other things on my plate. I started to reach out for somebody who could come visit with me so that he could get to know the situation, find out what a wonderful person Bill is and how much fun it is to visit, and then this will continue. And actually have started that process. Has actually worked out really well. This person lives near this hospital where he's in, and we've started to visit together. It's been delightful. So I really urge you, second public health announcement, I really urge you to ask that question. The question may not be a computer answer, and it may not be about your business, but ask the question, if you departed from the scene, who would be bereft? Who would be lost? Who really needs you? And make sure that you're really focusing on making a priority to make sure that those people are taken care of. So if I drop dead right now, I have a whole bunch of computer passwords in my system that people often ask me for. I wish they didn't. I work really hard to make sure people have their own password list and their own stuff. But the fact is, I'm sort of the guy of last resort when people have lost their passwords. So part of personal and business planning is to say, who gets those passwords? And this is the key to dropping dead safely. You need somebody who will step in and get access to everything. And the answer is both a personal and a business question. Because on a business level, right now, if I drop dead, I've got bills to pay. I've got like obligations that would be difficult for someone to sort out. But if they have a password list and some kind of guide to who you owe what, on a business level, this can really help you. But on a personal level, it will help you too. And I'm going to talk about a few tools that we're recommending. The reason why I'm including this in this talk is I want to give you an example of creating a little business. So Drop Dead Safely is, you could call it a micro business. So it's within a larger context of the computer consulting I do, but it's actually a program in its own right. And so as we talk about it, what I want you to look at is, look at the infrastructure involved. Ask yourself, is this viable? Does it make enough money to pay for itself? Who are the customers? Is it something that you're doing more for your own reasons? I think when you're solving a problem, there are different ways to solve it. And so one of the questions I ask is, are we solving the problem considerately? I would give an example. A counterexample would be Uber, which is one of the most inconsiderate solutions to a problem I have ever seen. Uber is solving a real problem, which is the taxi cab system doesn't work so great. There are definitely limitations to it and problems with it. But to have the callousness to come up with a platform and promote it that you know is going to remove a job that is the job of first resort for a large number of recent immigrants to this country, and not give not care about it, and not have any interest in that, and not make some kind of provision for it, is exactly what I think is bad business. So in exploring this, what we're trying to say is, pick something that people really care about and do it considerately. Do it in a way that's going to genuinely help people, not put people out of work in large numbers so that you can then take advantage of them. So let's talk about tools for a moment. When you're making a service offering to people, you have to help them do it. So if you say, okay, my job is to help you drop dead safely, what do I have to do with that? I'm a computer repairman. Like, what's my role? And it turns out that I have a really important role in that. And so one of the questions you want to ask yourself when you're offering services is, as a computer helper, where can you be helpful? And it turns out computer people can be very helpful in this particular issue. The way that I've helped myself with this, and we've started to help customers with this, is a couple of very simple tools. The most simple one is a password list, an effective password list. So this is KeePass, which is a password database. We're going to make a new one here. So we'll make a new database, and we'll put it in the documents directory, and we'll call it BNUG. So what I want to emphasize to you is that this program is a word processor for passwords. It's a novel idea, but it's a wonderful idea. What I mean by word processor is when you write a Word document, everything, all the great writing you do, the paragraphs, the sections, the chapters, it's all in one Word document, ending in .doc, that you can then email to your publisher or email to a friend to read over. Same with this. So the beauty of KeePass is it makes a single file which is encrypted using AES encryption. It's completely impregnable. If you use a password with 8 characters or more, there's no way anyone is ever going to get into this file. You could post it on the internet. It's perfectly safe. So we'll do a simple password. These people are fanatics, so look at their graph about how strong this password is. This password would take 20 billion years to decipher using a supercomputer, and still they're saying, what kind of password is that? One of the great features of KeePass is this 3 dots. If you click on the 3 dots, you get to see what you wrote. I can't tell you how important and valuable that is to people, to reassure them, to make sure they know what the password is. So now we're in. Now, if you are trying to help somebody take care of themselves and make sure that their people can find out everything about them, this is a wonderful tool because, for example, they can put their bank account here. So there's their bank. It has a username. And the password, it generates an automatic password, which I recommend you use. Really scary. This one is a very tough password to crack. I think it would take a supercomputer an infinite amount of time to crack. But you don't have to make it up. And this is a major problem that's happening now, is people are using the same password over and over. They use them on weaker sites. They're hacked there and then used on stronger sites. I really recommend you use this password generation feature. And KeePass will take care of you when you do. Here you put the URL. So now you have this entry for Bank of America. It just took a moment. Big money. If you go to URL, it'll automatically open the website for you. And then, oh, no, this is, sorry, what did I do? No, it's actually, the website is Bank of America. This is a cool website. But you know, I'm joking, but actually, if you think about it, the beauty of this is that you actually have to put the URL in here for your person. So it's not enough to say, go to the Bank of America website. We all know how easy it is to go to the Hewlett-Packard helping website and get some weird company someplace far away that pretends to be Hewlett-Packard. Having the URLs written down for people in this program is a major way of protecting them from going to the wrong place. Let me try that again. Is that the URL? Yeah. They didn't grab BOA, it seems. They didn't get that in time. First come, first serve. So here I am. Now this, again, think of your executor. Think of the person who's going to step in and help you in an emergency. They need to be able to get into this account. So they need to know the username and password. Well, they do. They just click here on auto type and it will type it in for them. And click the submit button. And of course they won't get in because it's not the right one. But it's not enough. Because if your executor is not going to come to your house and use your computer if you're sick, it's not practical. They might be far away. They might have a life. They have stuff to do. They're going to do it from their own computer. And what happens when I try to get into your Bank of America account, knowing your username and password from my computer? What happens?
They want to check your identity.
How do they do that?
They will ask you
say, what was your
question.
first car?
Right.
What
Right.
was your mother's maiden name?
So this is this again is where we have something special to offer. What I want you to observe, the purpose of this, partly I want you to learn about this what we're doing, but I also want you to observe how we're doing it. We're now at a stage where we're teaching the customer about why they need to do something about these secret questions. And we have something really substantial to offer that they can learn from us. Here it is. It's called the Sarah Palin problem. So the Sarah Palin problem is Governor Palin ran for vice president. It was a very memorable run in 2008 as John McCain's running mate. And her Facebook page was hacked. Why? Because her secret questions were, what is my husband's name and what high school did I go to? Now you laugh, she's a famous public figure. Obviously anyone could figure those out. Well, you are too. Every single person in this room is a famous public figure. If you want to find out my Yale Station post office box from 35 years ago, I'll give you 5 minutes and you'll nail it. This stuff is everywhere. You cannot write something like, what's the name of my first pet, and be sure that you didn't mention it in some Facebook page or some listing and it got sucked up by the huge internet vacuum cleaner. It's really important, in our opinion, to fictionalize these secret questions. But of course, you can't do it unless you have a safe way of recording it. And KeyPass provides that, a very safe way of recording it. This is a really serious problem. Someone was talking about it to me today. Her brother, I think, did the secret questions, but he couldn't remember whether he used the number 4 or he spelled F-O-U-R or whether it's capitalized. This drives anyone crazy. And if you add to it, somebody's just died, you're in grief, or somebody's really sick and you're worried about them, you don't need this aggravation. And this is a really good way to avoid it. So here, what you do is you type first pet. This is a field name that you're creating. It's a customized field name. It's built into KeyPass. So we say first pet. And then here, what we recommend is you do something completely goofy. You can say anything you want, just don't tell the truth. So you can have a little fun fictionalizing here. So your first pet was Solomon. No, that wasn't. My first pet was Hermes, but Solomon will do. Nobody will ever be able to figure this out from Facebook because it's nonsense. One of my colleagues even does this. Secret, it's the right answer, because that's what's going to get pasted in. You're going to paste from this program. You don't need to know what this is, and you don't care. So you now have a field that you can right-click on and copy it and paste it. So I want to emphasize the power of this. You can answer all the secret questions. You can put in your social security number. You can put in credit card numbers. You can put the number on the back side of the credit card. All of the stuff that people now are tormenting us with because we don't know, we now know. So when you set up a Carbonite account, the way of rescuing a Carbonite account, if the email account gets messed up, you stop using the email account, they can't get back to you, they're going to ask you for the last 8 digits of the credit card number you used. So what you do is, when you create the Carbonite account, create a new entry here, and put in your fields the last 8 digits of the credit card you used. Even if the credit card disappears, it doesn't matter, you have it here. So we turn to customers and say, here is a tool. It's free, it's open source, it's recommended by some of the best security experts in the country. If you do this, and you teach your executor how to do it, you will not have a password problem when you die or when you get sick. I'm going to save this. Here's the save button. So this is now saved. I'm going to go into the documents directory, and you see this bnug.kdbx? It's a tiny little file, just like a Word file. There's no difference. You can email it, you can post it on the internet, you can put it in an envelope in a flash drive, you can do whatever you want with it. It's impregnable. Unless you have the password, it's completely useless. It's a hunk of metal. But the person who has the password gets everything. And learning to use this program has taken most of our inexperienced computer users 10, 15 minutes tops.
So what do you advise them to do with the password for this application?
So what we do in our general practice, and again, remember, this is a meeting about business advice. We try to integrate this program with our larger advice that we give about computers. So one of the things we do with all of our customers is we make them do their own backups, and we make them do them well. And part of doing your own backups is checking your backup every week. And in order to do that, you have to know the backup password, and you have to actually type it in. And there's a wonderful fact of human nature is if you type something 3 or 4 times, you will never ever forget it. It will be with you forever. So we have people check their backup passwords every week, and we make the same password be the KeyPass password. So the answer is the customer will know it cold, and we work really hard to make that happen. We don't always succeed, we work really hard. But then the customer's job is to make sure that the executor knows what it is and has a way of knowing what it is. And this actually opens a really important question. One of the things I find when you do a new business offering is you find so many questions open up, really interesting ones. Here's one. Let's think about what we're asking here. We need someone to take over. So for example, in the larger question of who would take over my business if I die, Well, that means I need to teach someone my business, right? So isn't there a hazard if I teach people how to be computer people? They're going to go into competition, or they'll actually they'll go to my customers and say, I'll do what Adam does, but I'll do it for a lot less. And what do you think of that? Yes, there's a real risk of that. We shouldn't be naive about that. It can really happen. Well, let's think about this for our customers. We're telling our customers to take their most vital, sensitive information, financial information, and put it into a database and then give it to somebody. What are they doing? What if that person embezzles the money? So that's a really good question, and it's one that you need to answer. Often people's answer will be, I trust this person implicitly. That's not going to happen. Unfortunately, that is not necessarily the correct answer, but it is an answer. It's good to have a suggestion for a customer when they raise a difficult question. So our answer is, give the password to one person and give the database to another person. Without the two people getting together, there's no password database at all, and nobody can embezzle and nobody can steal. Much more important, because I think that is unlikely. Usually a close friend is not going to do that to you. What's worse is, what if something's missing and you can't confront your friend? You know that they wouldn't have done it, but in the back of your mind, it gnaws at you. What happened to this money? It disappeared. It couldn't have been my friend. He couldn't have done it, but I can't think of who else did it. When you give someone access to your stuff, you're also opening the possibility of suspicion, sometimes unfair suspicion, by dividing responsibilities. And this is something the corporate world does very well. In the corporate world, a well-run company would never allow a single person to have control over the company funds. There's always a check. There's always someone else who is able to inspect. You probably know the story that accountants in good companies, bookkeepers, are forbidden not to take a vacation. A bookkeeper that refuses to take a vacation because they're so dedicated is immediately a suspect for embezzlement, because they don't want, when they're on vacation, someone to see the books. I say this to emphasize that when you're in business, you're exposing yourself to some risk. So there's lots more to say about this program, but I just wanted to give that as a simple example. And I wanted to move on because we're talking about risk. I wanted to talk a bit about business structure. For people who are not yet in business for themselves and want to learn just the basics, I'm just going to run through the basics and be very interested to hear from people if they have comments. So in the United States, all businesses are profit, except for nonprofits, the special exception, are profit-making organizations. And the channeling of the money depends on how you set things up. So the simplest form is the form that my business is, which is called sole proprietorship. It's also called a doing business as, or a DBA. And what it essentially means is, I'm the business. Now, this has a wonderful simplicity. When I get money from customers, I can spend it right away. I don't owe anybody any explanation. It's my money. I pay taxes on it. It's considered, you fill out a special schedule called Schedule C, which says how the business finances work. But it's your money, and it's your liability. So the problem with the sole proprietorship is, if I make a really bad mistake and somebody sues me, they can get a lot of stuff. If I had a lot of stuff, they could get some of it. So if you are going to create a DBA, which is the simplest and nicest and most fun way to start a business, you need some protection. And so if you're in the computer business, in my opinion, there are two kinds of insurance you absolutely have to have. The purpose of insurance is only insure something you can't cover yourself. So don't buy insurance for something that that if it happened, you could deal with it. You want to buy insurance for something you can't deal with. So here's the thing I'm most worried about for all of us. You're at a customer site and you're reaching down to pull a cable and you knock a bookshelf down and it hits somebody and it paralyzes them. Now this is horrible. It's awful. You'd go through a trauma. You'd need therapy. It's a big deal. But wait a minute. We're in a country that has an extremely poor system for dealing with injuries. What would happen in that case would be a bunch of crazy lawsuits, a bunch of insurance companies going tooth and nail trying to figure out who's going to pay for the damages, who's going to pay for this person's loss of consortium, who's going to pay for all the crappy things that happen when you're injured, who's going to pay for the real cost of medical care. All of these questions are going to suddenly come to the fore. Now, meanwhile, you're right in the middle of this. What do you have? If you're lucky, you have a house, but your house is protected anyway from any kind of lawsuit, usually by the homestead provision. So what's going to happen? You're going to feel horrible. This guy's going to need your money and you're not going to have any. That's the really horrible part. The horrible part isn't that you might get sued and the person might come after you. The problem is you don't have anything, even you can't make a drop in the bucket for what this person's going to need, no matter who you are, no matter how wealthy you are. A deep injury like this costs millions of dollars and you don't have it. What you need is liability insurance. And the beauty of this is that in our profession, in the computer profession, it's rare that we knock over bookshelves and paralyze people. The rate of that kind of injury is rare, and therefore the insurance company only takes a little bit of money from each of us and pools it and uses it in an exigency like that. So for basic liability insurance, you'll probably pay like $700 a year. I consider it to be absolutely essential to being a responsible business person. If you're in business for yourself and you're going into somebody's company, somebody's house, somebody's company, somebody's place, you must have this insurance. To not have this insurance, in my opinion, is just inconsiderate. It's inconsiderate of other people's needs, and it's not being a responsible person. So I think you absolutely have to have this insurance. It's called basic business liability insurance. So liability insurance is to protect against you causing someone else an injury. That's what it covers. It does not cover anything to do with computers, and I'm going to talk about that next. So it does not cover, it specifically excludes damage you do by being a bad professional. That's not covered by this insurance. This covers an accident. The second kind of insurance, and then we'll talk about the other business structures. The second kind of insurance is errors and omissions insurance. What errors and omissions is supposed to cover is you screw up. The fact is we all screw up. And we're all lucky most of the time that our screw-ups don't cause an international incident, but once in a while it will. When you're doing anything, there's always some risk that something's going to go wrong. And even if you did everything right, a good lawyer can show that you did it wrong. So one of the things I learned from observing Nina and her insurance law is insurance isn't really about coverage. It's not really about them stepping in and paying, although that's kind of the bottom line for me from a moral standpoint. But the practical issue is, suppose that you're doing a consulting job for a large company and something really bad happens. They're going to sue you. Their insurance company's going to sue you. Everyone's going to sue you. All right, so let's hire a lawyer. How much does a lawyer charge an hour?
$350 an hour.
How much?
400.
Yeah, the going rate now for a really good lawyer is $350 to $400, even for a bad lawyer. Or a lot more. Well, wait a minute. So somebody sues you, you have to get a lawyer, right? Who's going to pay for this? The state steps in, right, and pays for your lawyer? Quiz question. Will the state step in and pay for your lawyer, Evie? Not a little. Not even a little. The only place was, and it wasn't until 1960-something, that the state was required to pay for lawyers for criminal defendants in Gideon versus Wainwright. Before that, you were in tough luck. You'd be arrested and sorry, buddy. That's correct. Not a dime. There's no public funding of any kind. In fact, there's no funding of any kind, which means that you're in real serious trouble. And you don't have $400 an hour to pay for a lawyer. What are you going to do? You're going to settle. So the remedy for this is to have insurance. Because if you have insurance, the key to insurance is that the insurance company is required by law to defend you. So the insurance company has to provide all the legal help and pays for all of it. The downside of it is you're a partner with the insurance company and they call the shots. So if they decide that you're going to settle, you're going to settle. The insurance company has a lot of control if they're paying for the lawyer. So I'm not saying that insurance is a picnic or that it's just, makes everything happy. But on balance, it really makes sense to have errors and omissions insurance. So if something goes wrong and a really smart lawyer tries to show that it was your fault, you have a really smart lawyer saying, no, it wasn't. And you have some kind of way of defending yourself. So I urge you to get, if you're going to be in practice by yourself, to get both of these kinds of insurance. And I will add that from a business building standpoint, when people work with me as coworkers, and technically they're employees of me, they're covered by my insurance. This is a benefit I'm offering to my employees. So my employees, as I mentioned before, could go out and work on their own. But that means they have to get their own liability and error and omissions insurance. And it can be actually kind of like having a roommate to do this together in a company. The second business structure is LLC, Limited Liability Corporation. It's like a corporation light. So you're protected in the sense that if you're sued, you're never personally sued. It's a separate entity. So if you got a business, you don't go out of business yourself, just the entity does. And the paperwork is lighter and the fee for getting started. A lot of solo practitioners use the LLC structure. The next structure is corporations. Some solos do that. If you have a corporation, you have to have a corporate board. You have to meet once a year. The taxation is different. You're taxed both as an individual company and as an individual. But for some people, it makes total sense. And the protection is enormous. So unfortunately, corporations can do whatever the hell they want and get away with it, and there's nothing anyone can do. Yeah.
There's all those flavors, subchapter S or is it or something?
There's an S corporation.
There's more than one flavor.
Yeah, there are different kinds, and you definitely want to get some advice about what makes sense for you. I didn't mention it here, and I think we should add it, I agree, is disability insurance. Having disability insurance made all the difference between a financial nightmare and actually being able to get by. And the disability insurance companies, they hated it, but they had to deal with it. And so we have to say disability insurance and life insurance are both, I think, an essential part of being in business. So just a quick note about home computer equipment. This is one of the odd things about insurance. So one of the things that's peculiar about risk, and this is true when you're teaching people about backups, and when you're teaching people about dropping dead safely, and you're teaching people about risk insurance, like disability insurance and life insurance, is that it doesn't affect most people most of the time. So it's not really heavily on your mind. You know, don't die very often. You don't get horribly disabled very often. You might know somebody who this happens to, but it's pretty easy to say, well, that, as Jack Nicholson says in The Shining, there's no chance of that happening to me. But there is. And if it does happen to you, one of the peculiar fantasies, I'm curious if other computer professionals have had this, people say this. No, I don't worry about backups. You know, if there's a fire, it's going to be so horrible, it won't matter. I don't know if you've ever heard that excuse for not taking care of important responsibilities. This is absolutely false. And I'll give you an example. One of my friends was in a horrible car accident. And you think, oh, horrible car accident. Like in the movies, everyone shows up and helps, and you know, you're brought to the hospital and everything's better, and people help you. No, the insurance company didn't want to pay on the car. Social Security refused to provide disability insurance to this person, even though she was horribly injured. Like a whole bunch of stupid, bad things happen. And the fact is, when a disaster happens, often a lot of really stupid, bad things happen too. And to the extent that you can reduce the risk of that, please do it. So having these insurances in place means that when something bad happens, you have support and help, and that really makes a huge difference. Yeah, Mark?
So how many clients do you need to start sole proprietorship versus LLC?
One client. Yeah. So you're in business when someone hands you $1, Mark. You're in business for yourself. The moment somebody pays you, you're in business. The question of when you want to choose one of these structures, my recommendation is that you let the business pay for it. So it's very silly to spend a lot of money creating a corporation if you don't have any customers yet. I recommend getting a DBA, and if you've never done this kind of work before, I recommend you work with another practitioner for a while before going into business for yourself. And then get to the point where your business structure makes financial sense to you. You're not spending a lot of money on setting up a corporation and doing all that stuff if you're not going to get customers. My own opinion is that if the minimum to be in business is to have basic liability insurance and a DBA. Oh, by the way, in Boston at least, I don't know where different people live. In Boston, when you have a DBA, you're required to register with the city. And the reason is very interesting. DBA means literally doing business as. And the reason for the regulation in Boston is I'm Adam Frost, DBA, Computer Care and Learning. The reason for the regulation is if I put a big sign outside my business and it says Computer Care and Learning, and I fleece you, you can go to Boston and say, who is the owner of Computer Care and Learning? And they were required to register with their name, their full name and address, and then the name of the company. So the business registration, its only purpose is $50 every 4 years or $60 every 4 years. The only purpose is to provide that accountability, even for a little DBA. Just one quick note about insurance, but the reason why I mentioned this thing about the last foot, when something bad happens, that's when you find out what insurance you have, unfortunately, but I'm going to try to help you. Your computer equipment that you have in your house that you're using exclusively for business, you will not be covered if your insurance, if it breaks or it's stolen. Your home insurance company will say, no, look here, there's a clause that says computers that are used for business are only covered for $300 or something. Watch out for that, and please check with your insurance company and make sure that there's usually a small rider you can add to your insurance to make sure you're fully covered, make sure your equipment is fully covered and you don't find that out the hard way. How much should you charge when you're being a computer helper? How much should we charge?
The market
What the
can bear.
market bear? What the market bear?
What the market bears, market. Okay, I don't disagree. How do we know what market is?
A lot of times you ask somebody else in some of business what they charge and the duplicate, and then that's your charge.
So is Adam Smith right? Adam Smith, the great economist, said one time that whenever you see two business people talking on the street corner, they're conspiring against the public. And my own suggestion about business is you don't want customers to be thinking a lot about money. You want the customers to be thinking about, I am so lucky that this person is helping me, and I'll pay a fair price for what they're doing for me. So that's the relationship that I really recommend you have. And so my initial question was how much to charge? What's a fair price? I don't have an easy answer to this, but I'll tell you the approach that I've used that has had some merit. So when I first started in business, one of my buddies started a very successful software company. And so he was the go-to guy to ask business advice. So I said to him, how much, what should I do? How should I charge? And he looked at me and said, we never charge flat rate for anything. So he was saying that they do these software projects for some large companies and some small companies, and it was their policy never ever to say this project will charge you $3,500 for this. And I said, why? And he said, because you're betting against the customer when you do that. Think about what the real dynamics of that are. You make the deal, you're getting $3,500 for the project. What are your pressures and incentives? Is it to lavish a lot of care and trouble and time on this project? Or is it to get the project done as quickly as possible because then you're going to get the biggest profit? Your economic interest is in contrast to the quality interest. And his particular business was one that he really cared about software quality. It was his big selling point. And so for him, if somebody did not very good work, if one of his the people he was paying for projects did not very good work for him, it would just completely screw him up. And so for him, he paid by the hour. But that creates another problem, which is how do you know the hour you're getting is a fair hour? Like how do you know? And my answer is, you're on display all the time. Every time you work for a customer, including my customers of 20 or 25 years, I'm on the spot. Like if I'm not helping them, if I'm not doing something right for them, or I do a bad job, they'll be mad, or they'll say I can't work with you anymore, or whatever. So the way you make sure, it's my business's obligation to make sure every hour is a really good hour for people. So I decided, based on my friend's advice, to come up with a fixed hourly rate that I would be ruthless about. Everybody gets charged the same rate. The only distinction I made was we realized that working for companies have different problems and challenges and different expenses. For example, the bulk of this insurance isn't for home users. Home users aren't going to sue you with a big law firm. It's for corporate. So out of kind of a sense of fairness and also ability to pay, we decided to have two rates, a home and solo rate and a company rate. So the home and solo rate a long time ago got set at $85 an hour, and the index that one of my customers recommended was the union plumbing rate. Union plumbers charge about $85 an hour for home users, and they charge about $125 for company users. And so that's what we do. So we charge $125 for companies. Now our strategy is different than Evie's, and a little closer, I think, to what Glenn is suggesting. If you go to our website, there's a link called The Basics, and if you click on it, it tells us how much we charge. That's the beginning and the end of it. There's no negotiation. I don't do sliding scale. I don't give discounts. I charge everybody exactly the same. I found this to be very, very helpful in my branch of the profession, because most people who come to see me have read this. They already know how much I'm going to charge. And because there's no issue about sliding scales or discounts, there's never any discussion about it. I never offer them, I never accept them, I just don't do them. And then I'm free to relax and say, this is how much we charge. If you hire me for an hour, you're getting the taxi and you're driving. That's what you want to do. I'm happy to drive with you. But what my customers pick up with, I'm really okay with your getting out and walking. That's really all right. I have enough customers that your getting out and walking is not going to hurt me financially. On the contrary, it will help me. Because if you get out and walk, while you're walking, you'll say, there's this great taxi behind me and he's free. I'm sending the message to people that I really want to help you and I want to work with you. Please hire me if you wish and I'll work hard to help you. This is how much we charge. It creates actually a real freedom in the relationship. This structure has helped us because it's actually quite affordable. So people in our neighborhood, the neighborhood I live in, for example, are librarians, people who work for the T. All of these people can afford to pay $170 to get a couple of hours of really good computer help. It's not going to kill them. They pay that much for a plumber, they pay that much for other kind of service people. It's really a good deal, and it's also affordable for me. If people are paying that rate and they really pay it, and there's no hidden anything, this is kind of a riff on what Glenn was saying, which is it's too complicated if you start having different fee structures. And you think customers don't talk to each other? Wait a minute, you're paying him what? This way, everyone knows what the rate is. So here's the thing about this, which is if you're charging these kinds of rates, it means that your customer base is going to be much larger. Once you start charging $250, $300 an hour, there are only a very small number of people who can afford you. And I want to tell you the hidden dark side of that. Two really hidden dark side. One is that my observation for many years, and also watching my father and the business world that he lived in, once you're starting dealing with customers like that, your business is much more susceptible to ebbs and flows and the business cycle. The fact is, at that level, businesses come and go, and their ability to spend that kind of money comes and go, and they're much more likely to seek other alternatives, even when they're not in a flush time. So you're actually putting yourself in a more vulnerable position. The second thing is, since you'll have fewer customers, those customers will matter more. And when one of them goes out of business or has trouble, it will hurt you more. The beauty of having a large customer base, my little company, which is mostly serviced by me only, I have some coworkers, but it's not as full of group practice as I hope to make it. 200 or 300 people, I would say, are on my customer list and would feel comfortable calling me in an emergency. This is pretty wonderful, because what it really means is somebody calls me every day. There's always something to do. I'm never without work to do. And the choice of fee, I think, has played an important role in that, because it's a kind of fee that most people can afford, and it's made the customer base much broader than it would be. But because it's so large, there's no one customer who calls the shots. Like, the fact is, if a customer gets pissed at me or treats me badly, and this does happen, my response is, I'm sorry you feel that way. But not, oh my God, if I don't kiss this customer's ass, I'm not going to be able to pay for anything. That's a terrible attitude to have as an independent professional, especially one where you have to kick some butt yourself. So speaking of kicking butt, the videographer is reminding me that we're done. So I want to encourage people to read more about this, learn more about it, talk more about it, and I hope we can continue this discussion. I think it's a really rich and important one. Thanks so much for coming out.